I'll just play you this one soundbite. We've been covering it very closely, and the indictment does cite a lot of this terrible behavior. But just let me play one soundbite for you, Professor, of him at the event in the church. And you tell me whether this sounds like journalist or protester. Here it is.
This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street, you start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution, when you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And if you remember what the Civil Rights Movement was about, the Civil Rights Movement was about these very kinds of protests. And for some reason, in our modern era, people think that in order to have protests, you got to be, cordoned off to a certain area and, what time you can protest. There's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what time you can protest. You can protest at any time. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt, it's to make uncomfortable. And that's what they're doing. And that's what I believe when I say everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to make people uncomfortable in these times. If you see how uncomfortably and how harsh people are being treated on the streets, you have to be willing to go into places and disrupt and make people uncomfortable. That is what this country is about.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary. I'm so glad you did show that passage. This is a guy who just last night got a standing ovation at an awards ceremony by folks in Hollywood. What they don't show, by the way, when he says that this is supposed to make people uncomfortable, is the child being cradled by his father because he's terrified because he came there to a church service and found himself in the middle of what seemed to be a building riot. And you also do, I think that your point is a good one, Megyn, that it is hard to see that as journalism. It seems to me to be advocacy. But this is something that the courts are really struggling with in good faith.